to be covering specifically today. We'll touch on the words before and after this underlying section there. But we're going to look at how Jesus suffered, how he was crucified, how he died, how he was buried, how he descended into hell. We're going to focus on that with the scripture readings. And then how the third day he rose again from the dead, and then he ascended into heaven. This Thursday is actually Ascension Day. It marks the days after Easter, where the church recognizes that Jesus has ascended. He appeared with the disciples for 40 days before he actually ascended. And the Bible records how. We'll look at that next week also, but I just wanted to throw that in there. So this coming Thursday, is the day that the church universal recognizes Ascension Day this year. And then he sits at the right hand of God, the Father Almighty. From there, he will come to judge the living and the dead. And we'll look at that next week. I think a very, very special message planned for next week, too. It's Mother's Day next week, by the way. So, again, for those of you that need to do something with that, now you don't have an excuse to skip it. So, and then from the Catechism, and what happens with these words, what does this mean? It takes the great words of the second article about Jesus, all the actions that he does for us, and just kind of tries to tease them out a little bit. Again, these words don't exhaust what's in the Apostles' Creed here. As we try to exhaust the words that are in the Apostles' Creed, we'll get exhausted before we can exhaust them. Even these words and what does this mean, kind of, again, as it teases it out. And just great words. And hopefully we can give it some thought this morning, and thought for many, many mornings after this. Because these words are about Jesus. And I don't think there's anything more crucial for us in our faith, to pile drive our faith, as we've been talking about. The truth of this is what we're going to see again this morning. So, from what does this mean? I believe that Jesus Christ, true God, again, that's really huge, true God, begotten of the Father from eternity. Oh man, that just kind of already stretches us. And also true man. He's true man. He's true man. He's born of the Virgin Mary. That he is my Lord who has redeemed me. Here's these actions. A lost and condemned person, purchased and won me from all sins, from death, from the power of the devil, not with gold or silver, but with his innocent suffering and death. There's some of those words. That I may be his own and live under him in his kingdom and serve him in everlasting righteousness, innocence, blessedness. Just as he is risen from the dead. And we believe that, right? We believe that he is risen from the dead. He lives and reigns to all eternity. And there's that wonder of he's living to all eternity. We can't really get our heads wrapped around it, but we believe. And then we say these words, this is most certainly true. Let's say those words together. This is most certainly true. And I'm going to put a diagram up on our screens this morning. And it uses the words of the second article of the Apostles' Creed. There's kind of these steps. There's Jesus in his state of humiliation. That he's conceived, he's born, he's suffered, he's crucified, he's died, he's buried. And then it steps back up towards exaltation. We're going to see this morning how it is that when he descended into hell, it's actually a step of his exaltation. Not more humiliation. We'll see why that is and how the Bible describes that. That he rose on that third day, and again, we all know that we celebrate that. If you were here for Easter, oh man, and he ascended, and the disciples saw Jesus kind of rise up and disappear before their eyes. And he sits at the right hand of God, and he's coming again. He's coming again. When you look at all those words there, the only one that we're waiting to be fulfilled is coming again. All these others, we believe, have already happened. Our faith is based on it. The truth that we have, that we are Christians, that we would call ourselves Christians, are based on these actions done by Jesus for us. And so this morning, what we're thinking about is that our salvation is a deep sweep. Again, we believe Jesus starts there, as we read there in the What Does This Mean? He is from all eternity. But at some point, he became like one of us. He lowered himself down into what we call the state of humiliation. He left behind some of that majesty of being there with the Father in all the glory. And he came and he breathed the air that we breathe. He walked in the dirt that we walked, he slept, he drank water, he ate food. So he's conceived, born, then we know that he suffered, he crucified, he died, he was buried. And if you were around Easter and right before, we talked about how Jesus is buried in a tomb, in a garden, but he doesn't stay buried in a tomb, in a garden. He comes back to life on that third day, and then he ascended and he sits. And again, the only thing we're waiting for is him coming again and coming again and coming again. So if you believe all of this, there's a wonder to this. So that's this idea of humiliation and exaltation. So it starts, sweeps way down deep, and rises back up. But in the motion of that sweep, in the motion of this deep sweep, he's wanting to catch up souls like ours. There's a wonderful force, a wonderful just motion that's happening in our salvation. And we get caught up in it. It's not what we do. It's what Jesus does for us. If we can get that right, boy, these truths are just going to go deep, and they will hold us, they will sustain us. There are all kinds of stuff that will happen in our lives. Sometimes when the world just seems to be shaken like this, if we get these words of the Apostles' Creed from the Bible deep down within us, boy, we're going to somehow, we'll last some of that shaking, and someday we'll be with him when he comes again. So, a few Bible passages, first of all from Peter. And Peter walked with Jesus. Peter's kind of the main disciple. Peter's always listed first when they list the names of the disciples. When he writes his letters, he's going to write about Jesus, and he's going to write for us some things about Jesus, some truths that we need to know. Again, these truths that fit into this story that we have up on our screens. It says, "For Christ also suffered once for sins." There's that word suffered. He's just reflecting on that, making sure that, we keep reminding. And then the righteous for the unrighteous. Jesus is the righteous. And everybody else, including all of us who are here this morning, we're the unrighteous. We don't like to think of it like that. But we're the unrighteous. Jesus is the only righteous. But Peter's writing that. Peter would say, Jesus is the only righteous, I'm unrighteous. And he's writing to all of us that we're unrighteous too. But the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit. And then here's this verse 19 where we get this idea that he descended into hell, in which he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison. In which he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison. Jesus, after he died, his suffering is done. When he's buried, that lowest step of his humiliation, planted in the garden, in that tomb, he now is going to start his journey of exaltation. And so he goes to the spirits in darkness and proclaims to them, I've done it. There will be other souls that will be planted in tombs, in a garden. But listen here, powers of hell. You won't keep them there. Listen here, devil. I know you want to grab them and keep them, but it's not happening. It's not happening. So he descends into hell, not to suffer more, but to say, things are changing. Things are changing in this world. And so we see Jesus claim the wonders of what he is accomplishing. Then it goes on and says, because they formerly did not obey when God's patience waited in the days of Noah, Peter reaches back and wants to give us this story of faith in Noah. Again, we know that it took 100 years or so to build that ark. It's going to reference that. Peter follows Jesus, and Jesus was in that story of Noah. And so if Peter references Noah as he's following Jesus, I think I'm just going to go with Peter, who followed Jesus, who rose from the dead. Anybody that rises from the dead, if they believe that Noah happened, I'm going to just kind of say, I'm going to go with that. So he references Noah because they formerly did not obey when God's patience waited in the days of Noah while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is, 8 persons, were brought safely through the water. Now he's going to connect that to this wonderful sacrament of baptism. Baptism, which corresponds to this, now saves you, not as a removal of dirt from the body, but as an appeal to God for a good conscience through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Okay, baptism is connected to what we're seeing here in the state of humiliation and exaltation. Jesus is doing this for us, and baptism is a part of that. And then in verse 22 it says, who has gone into heaven, so there's that ascension, and is at the right hand of God. He's sitting at the right hand of God, with angels, with authorities, and powers having been subjected to him. And when he descends into hell, is to proclaim victory over eternal death. We're all going to die. But when we die, if the devil comes and tries to claim us, Jesus says, get your hands off of my son. Get your hands off of my daughter. I'm going to give her a breath of life again. And he's going to be with me for all eternity. Get back now. Get back. That's our Jesus. That's what he does for us. That's the promise that we're being swept into. So the Apostle Paul, in the book of Colossians, also has this description, and we're going to get to it when we get to verse 15, but boy, verses 8 through 15 are just some great biblical truths, some great biblical theology, and I just didn't want to skip to verse 15 before seeing all the wonders that are in these other verses. So the Apostle Paul writes for us, again, he's wanting to pile drive the faith into us. The Christian faith, this true Christian faith. This is the sweep of salvation. We have to know this and be somehow swept a bit into it to know that we are saved. So the Apostle Paul writes, see to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy and empty deceit, according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the world, and not according to Christ. Again, the Apostle Paul is letting us know here that it's possible to be caught captive by philosophy and empty deceit. Some of us, some of you, when you went to college and you were in a large freshman class, you heard a professor. And that professor, whether it was in English or some field of science or maybe in mathematics or just whatever, they decided that one of their lectures was going to be how the Bible is just a myth. You believe Noah and the ark and the whole flood thing, you're just goofy. If you believe Jonah and the whale, if you believe the Israelites crossed the Red Sea and then all of the Egyptians were down, the Bible is just a myth. And some of us, because they like this professor. And a lot of us, they're going to learn some wonderful things. They know that this professor is smarter, that she is smarter than them. And when she says that, it just seems to make some kind of sense. Because we haven't really been power-driven in these words and in the Bible that are connected to all these words, all these phrases, this truth. But I would submit to you this morning that some of those professors, he or she, they may have changed their minds since you were a freshman. But some of them maybe stayed in that faith according to natural knowledge, and now they don't speak at all. They have no voice. Their voice has gone silent. And the voice of Jesus continues on. So the Apostle Paul has to write about that 2,000 years ago. But it's still true today, isn't it? And sometimes that doesn't happen just in college, does it? Sometimes it happens when we're watching TV and there's some kind of a spiritual conversation that goes on. Sometimes it's not even when we're watching TV, it's in a book that we read or a magazine that we read or a conversation that we have with a good friend, with a family member. And they just, tell us that, how can you believe that stuff? I'm just going to live a good life. Verse 9, it says, for in him, and then again, these words, he warns us, and then he just, for in him the whole fullness of deity dwells bodily. That's a verse right there that if you really try to think about it just a little bit, for in him the whole fullness of deity dwells bodily. This God, this amazing God from all eternity to all eternity, for a little while he dwelled in the fullness of deity in his body. Oh. It goes on and it says, and you have been filled in him, who is the head of all rule and authority. In him you were also circumcised with a circumcision made without hands, by putting off the body of the flesh by the circumcision of Christ, having been buried with him in baptism, in which you were also raised with him through faith in the powerful working of God, who raised him from the dead. We don't have a lot of time with this, but circumcision is this Old Testament deal that they did that was marking them as the people of God. But marking them as the people of God, not because in essence they were more special than all the other people, but marking them as the people of God, that through these people, that God is going to do his plan of salvation. So we know that Jesus is connected to those circumcised people, that nation of Israel. Jesus himself is circumcised. We read about John the Baptist being circumcised. Jesus got it. So there's all this circumcision, but now that circumcision goes, and now it's baptism. It's baptism. We're all baptized into the wonder of who this. We're baptized into the truth of words of the Apostles' Creed. This second article. We're baptized into Jesus, and we die in our baptism, and we're raised back to. That's what the Apostle Paul is saying here with it. In verse 13, and you who were dead in your trespasses in the uncircumcision of your flesh, God made alive together with him, having forgiven us all our trespasses, by canceling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands, by canceling the record of the debt that stood against us with its legal demands. Can we take just a moment to think about what that means? Legal demands. If someone has done the crime, sometimes they say, if you've done the crime, you've got to pay the time. How long would a judge last in one of our courts if before that judge, time after time, someone came before that judge, that him or that her, and there was video evidence, and there was hard evidence in all kinds of ways, DNA, just do it all. Maybe some of you are CSI fans, but there's just all this, and the judge would say over and over again, yeah, not guilty. Yeah, you're free. Yeah. That judge wouldn't last real long, would it? There are legal demands because we are unrighteous, because we are all sinners, and there's a just judge. Legally, that judge has to say, I can't let you go. You're guilty. But, this is the gospel. This is the words of this second article. We have Jesus that steps in and says, hey, Father, dear judge, I know they're guilty. I've seen it. You've seen it. Many others have seen it too. But whatever it is that should go on them, a just punishment, you put it on me. And the great judge puts it on him as he is suffered, crucified, died, and buried. But because he is, we get his victory, and because he descended. We're going to get his victory because he rose. We're going to rise with him. We're going to ascend with him. We're not going to sit with him, but who wants to sit with him? Because we'll be there. And when he comes again, sweet. It's just going to be sweet. So by canceling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands, this he set aside, nailing to the cross. And then here's this descending into hell thing again. He disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in him. So again, whenever the devil, and you feel like the devil, and sometimes we all feel like this, that the devil somehow has his hands around our ankles and he's pulling us down, he's pulling us down, he's pulling us down. And Jesus says, get your hands off. My son, my daughter, that soul matters to me. All this I have done for that soul. Then one more Bible passage from Ephesians 4, 3 verses 8, 9, and 10. Therefore it says, when he ascended on high, there it is, he ascended on high, he led a host of captives, and he gave gifts to men, in saying, he ascended, what does it mean? But that he also descended into the lower parts of the earth. He who descended is the one who ascended far above all the heavens, that he might fill all things. So there's this sweep, this deep sweep. There's Jesus, and he comes down and he goes back up. And now here we are, we're in the midst of that sweep. We're trying to get caught up in that sweep, this deep sweep. How deep does Jesus have to come for us? How deep does Jesus have to come for you? How deep does Jesus have to come for me? And sometimes our thoughts are probably something like this. They're not Bible thoughts. They're not Apostle Creed thoughts. But they're thoughts that happen in the church. They're thoughts that happen between our family members, between our friends. The thought is, Jesus, how deep does he have to come for me? Not all that deep. Because again, we're always doing this thing of, I know I'm not as good as them, but I certainly am not as bad as them. So Jesus, he just kind of has to skim the surface to catch me. So I'm cooperating with him somehow. I'm bringing him some of my goodness. I mean, I'm here in church on a Sunday morning when I could be outside in the warm weather like lots of other people. Why would Jesus have to reach so deep to me? If you think that Jesus doesn't have to reach too deep, if I think that Jesus doesn't have to reach too deep, I really don't know him that well. And I don't know the teaching of this very well either. And Jesus reaches real deep. Not only do I not know Jesus real well, I really don't understand this whole sin thing that's in me, the depravity of this sin thing that's in me. But as we start understanding how deep it is that Jesus comes for us, it doesn't depress us. I don't want this to depress. I mean, you are a sinner. You're unrighteous. I'm unrighteous. But the reason I want us to realize how deep Jesus has to come is because there's a majestic reach of Jesus. I mean, just the wonder of him leaving the glories of heaven and undergoing under this state of humiliation for us, that conceived, born, suffered, crucified, died, buried for us. There is a majestic reach for us so that we don't go away from him. And just as there's a deep, majestic reach of Jesus, what he's taking us to, how majestic is that? One last thing. If we look at this equation that Jesus plus me equals salvation, right? That's really what we've been thinking about, what we want to. It's Jesus plus me equals salvation. We're saying this morning, here's all that Jesus brings. all this deep sweep of our salvation, that our salvation is this deep sweep, this is all that Jesus brings, what do I bring to that equation? You bring one thing, I bring one thing only. I think you know what it is. Sin. When Jesus comes again, and he is coming again, and he would ask you, it's you and me to salvation. Here's what I've done for you, and now what have you done? Then if you said to him, here's my church attendance, here's my praying, here's my giving, here's my serving, here's my belief, here's all the good things that I did, there's just going to be an X on that. It's Jesus plus me, plus my sin, equals salvation. It's Jesus who deals with my sin and takes away its effects and equals salvation. What do I bring to the equation? Jesus plus me equals salvation. The Apostles' Creed teaches that from the beginning to the end of it, especially this second article. This is something that needs to go deep within us. This is something that might have to be corrected in some of our thinking, in some of our faith. And let me tell you, some of the ways that you're going to know that it's being corrected, some of the ways that I know that it's been corrected in me over the years, is how I now read the Bible. I'm not reading the Bible just to get a lot of knowledge, to know all the stories, and to whoop you when we play Bible trivia. I'm reading the Bible because I'm realizing how deep Jesus has to come to save a sinner such as I. And I'm reading that Bible because it's true that he comes so deep to save me, and I'm on my way. Not because of all my Bible reading, but because of Jesus. How you're going to tell if this theology starts getting right in you, it's going to change kind of that attitude that you have about coming to church. It's going to change the attitude that you have about coming to church in the summer. It's going to change the attitude that you have about coming to church in the fall, in the winter, in the spring. On warm days, on cold days. It's just going to change the attitude that, I'm not going to church so I can get myself, but I'm going to church so I can hear more about wonder of this salvation. How amazing it is that my Jesus comes and saves me. When this theology is getting corrected in us, when we start really getting this whole deal, it's going to change the way you pray. You're not going to just keep praying that, how can my life be made more comfortable so that my children or the ones that I care about, their lives will go well. And how it is that, again, I'll keep getting the right kind of finances, I'll have a good job, and, just all those kind of, sometimes our prayers are really, we gotta, just selfish prayers. God, make me happy. Do this for me. Praying will start changing because we realize that, there's this Jesus, and he's saved me, and maybe he's going to save some others. Through our attitude about giving will change. Our attitude about following Jesus is going to change. Some of us right now, we think we're following Jesus because we're following the examples of others who say that they're following Jesus. But maybe sometimes there are people around us that aren't following Jesus, even though they say they're following Jesus. So you're not really following Jesus unless you really start getting this deep within you. And others that say they're following Jesus, it's not real safe to follow them unless we see some of these actions come out of them. So this morning, the call is, are you following Jesus? Not what you think is following Jesus, but are you following Jesus? Are these words of the Apostles' Creed gripping you? Are you feeling like you really do need to get caught up in this deep sweep? Do you believe that it really is Jesus plus me, my sin, equals salvation? me plus my sin and nothing else? Do you really believe that? Because it's going to change a lot of things if we do. It's changed a whole lot of things in the course of my life. And I look forward to what's going to continue to change. There is the deep sweep of Jesus. Our salvation in Jesus. The wonder of Him. Let's stand and pray. Jesus, you give us the truth that we might know you and that we might follow you. And so we would ask that, again, you would help us, Jesus, to base our truth on the teaching of your word, on the truths of the Apostles' Creed, and help us, Jesus, not to follow the model of some of the others that call you as a follower. And again, Jesus, sometimes I don't even know how to pray for us not to do that, because we're always kind of following others that are saying that they're following you. And so, Jesus, help us to follow you with others who are truly following you. May these words of the Apostles' Creed somehow get a hold of us. May the truth of what it really means that you have descended into hell, and that we're not going to have to descend into hell because you already did. Jesus, help us to have this deep faith just driven deeply in us with your truth, with your grace, with your wonder, with your majesty, with our sweetly surrendering to you. Jesus, may it happen, and may we be amazed. We ask and pray these things in your name, Jesus. We also pray the prayer that you've taught us to pray. Again, may we be amazed at this prayer over and over again. Let's join together and pray the Lord's Prayer. It's up on the screens. You can pray it from your heart with your eyes closed, however it is that you'd like to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come.